Well, I guess today we're talking about fiddlesticks and horses going down coal chutes and and more fiddlesticks and Niagara Falls and 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 legal proceedings that are 100% real and could
Yeah.
happen in real life. And
I can't wait to see the tongue lashing that Christian gives the court scenes in this film.
Okay.
No,
so
really.
I
During the first
the
one,
first court
I
scene
was
is
like,
not that
oh, this
bad.
is going to be good. During that opening argument that turns into an improvisational one-man play and then
yeah.
a closing argument.
Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray star in Remember the Night, which I don't know if Letterboxd is accurate, but it released in January of 1940.
Okay.
It's directed by Mitchell
Oh.
Eisen, and Preston Sturgis wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a weird. I always choose the ones that are amalgamations of genres. It's not usually clear cut. Sometimes it's just a war film, but usually it has a lot of genres going on. But we can very confidently say this is a romance, very confidently.
Yes.
But there are a lot of weird. I wouldn't even say it's dark humor. It's just like tongue in cheek, like sarcasm and bitterness throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of this?
I was kind of caught off guard by this one because I'm fairly familiar with screwball comedy of the 30s and 40s, which this seems to be at least trying to be or making a pass at being. I think Preston Sturgis's script certainly is a screwball comedy. But as I mentioned in my Letterboxd review, there's this very kind of, and maybe it caught me on the wrong night. I don't know. Maybe you guys didn't pick this up, but there's this very kind of like bleak, sad streak that I feel runs throughout the whole thing tonally that, I don't know, it kind of threw off the tone of the whole piece for me. And maybe not necessarily a bad way, but even the scenes that are meant to be jolly have this weird kind of like sad, lonely feel to them, to me. It all feels very kind of... So the overall premise is that Fred McMurray, who I don't really like, I might be alone in that, but I have not liked him in most of the things I've seen. I think in my review of Double Indemnity, I called him a big bag of dirt or something like that. I don't find him very emotive or charismatic. But Fred McMurray plays the assistant DA of, I think it's set in New York, the first part at least. And he is meant to be prosecuting Barbara Stanwyck because she is a habitual pickpocket. However, it's right before the holidays, so any description of this movie will say that he has it arranged that the case be delayed until after the holidays because he doesn't want the jury to be in the holiday spirit because he feels they'll let her go. Fred McMurray doesn't really have a lot to do with that happening. It's kind of the other lawyer who sort of sets everything up for him, and then that does happen. But Fred McMurray feels guilty about the fact that Barbara Stanwyck will be spending the holidays in prison, or in jail, rather. And so he sets it up that he gets her out on bail, and then he says, well, you live here wherever she says she lives for the holidays. I live fairly close, so I'll drop you off on my way home. And shenanigans ensue. But a lot of them aren't very funny shenanigans, and they're not even deliberately, meant to be funny shenanigans. We see a lot of sad things, a lot of people kind of coming home for the holidays and realizing home is different and not going to be the same again. I think there's one shot of it actually snowing. The rest of the time, it's just kind of like half-melted piles of slush on the ground. It's very kind of cold and distant in a way I wasn't expecting. And it even ends on kind of like a dour, ambiguous note. I gave it a 3 out of 5. I did not, to borrow some of Gloria's parlance, I did not find it especially holly jolly. But I think it is certainly the most Christmassy of the Christmas movies that we've talked about in this set of holiday specials.
which is absolutely insane.
Yeah. That's interesting. Reading your review, Zach, I sometimes forget that you put your holiday goggles on because you praise it with such a sort of optimistic view that I feel like you rarely view movies with. Not to say that's a bad thing, but um, where to start? You've given me so many things to think about. I will agree on the McMurray point, though I do think he is significantly worse in Double Indemnity than he is here. I think there's the charm and a sincerity to his performance here, where it doesn't. He's more believable than he is in a noir setting. In particular, that first courtroom scene, I almost hesitate to say this, but he reminds me of one of the attorneys that I worked for.
Oh my
last
God.
summer.
Is he a listener?
And that scene at least struck me as at least somewhat plausible because to me it would make sense that he knows this defense attorney well enough to know that he'll push for these absurd advantages, which will then open the door for him to ask for the continuance. And the whole bit about asking for the continuance is just like, oh my gosh, that's been my whole semester of without getting into details. That's just like, that is the culture almost everywhere. So that made sense. I don't know if I found this especially cold or unhappy, but I guess there's a loneliness to McMurray and Stanwyck's characters that's necessary to sort of cultivate this connection between them. And I think both performers are fun. And this is an interesting, as far as I know, Barbara Stanwyck, I'm familiar with her in her like femme fatale roles, also in Double Indemnity, for example. But she's playing against type here and does well. I was just completely distracted by how crazy this freaking premise is, that this prosecuting attorney would be romantically involved with a defendant he's prosecuting. That is such a freaking conflict of interest at best, and like absolute moral disaster at worst. And the further it goes along, like I say in my review, I know this is like an innocent film from a more innocent time, and this really isn't something I should be dwelling on, or the movie expects most viewers to be dwelling on. I don't think this necessarily even suggests that this would be okay, but there's this, the whole bit is like Fat Mike brings her over to his place and he doesn't expect it, and there's like this presumption, I guess, on Fat Mike's part that Sergeant wants to seduce her, which is just like, that is too it's hard for me to get past that, especially because I know, just like talking to my parents about their experience when they were practicing attorneys, there are like really scummy judges and attorneys out there that will like abuse their power in this way. And I'm not saying that Sergeant's character really does that. I don't think that's how the movie plays out, where he's this like scumbag necessarily. I think it plays out more or less sincerely, and his chemistry with Stanwyck is fine. But I just couldn't get over that hump. And then also, I should mention the character Rufus, who is a pretty unfortunate Jim Crow character, I would say. And that just kind of lingers over the movie to even more of an extent than I really expected. It was a 2.5 for me. When Mitchell told us he picked this film, I thought this would be like Christian's favorite, or at least one where I liked it the most of the three of us. So I'm a little surprised to be here, but I think this might be just because of my law student status.
This is very interesting. This is way more interesting than I would have thought picking this at all. I literally, my blind picks tend to be W's for me. And I think this was a huge W. I'm surprised. I like this more than both of you combined, probably.
Really?
I really, guys, I really enjoyed this. Okay. I don't know why. Like, I was hung up I was hung up on so many of the 40s isms the whole time,
Hmm.
and part of it was reinforced by just the colloquial way of speaking was really bothering me. And it wasn't bothering me like, oh, you shouldn't say that, or oh, like Rufus shouldn't be treated that way. Obviously, yes. Um, it bothered me just from the outset because I was I just wasn't expecting it. Not necessarily going a cold direction in my eyes, but going more of like a almost like it's like a side quest that's actually the main story. And like the like you really feel like the when a film starts with a courtroom scene, it's kind of
Hmm.
setting the precedence for the rest of the film. To me, it was like a Sam, like a mega stuff Oreo, where it was like the actual film is in the middle, and you're like all of a sudden you're down, you're down to the bottom cookie, and you're like, oh crap, we're back at the courtroom again. And I just part of that, I think, Zach, is because I immediately noticed that it was basically dark the entire time except those
Hmm.
two courtroom scenes. It is essentially dark at like nighttime the
Yeah.
whole time. And it's almost it's like a weird, it's not like a dreamlike state or a nightmare state. It's almost like a purgatory. Like when they show up to the
Hmm.
houses are like haunted house, like they're framed almost like haunted houses.
Yeah.
Like it's like on a little hill, and they go inside and everything's all dark, and they're like
Hmm.
turning on the lights and everything. I'm like, this is like a freaky house. Obviously Lee's house is a lot more freakier, and things are a lot more warm and jolly in Jack's
Hmm.
house, but still kind of a it's still kind of like an empty feeling house.
Hmm.
And I started to realize the background, like forming of the characters. There's kind of like a nature nurture theme going on that isn't really super addressed, but it does come up in conversation when they're talking about Jack's past. And I thought it was super engaging that they while the romance was kind of like there's like this tension and denial throughout the entire film, which was super engaging for me. I just think that seeing it's very atypical to see like I can that guy that's going to be like I can fix her and her be like completely broken from how she was raised. And both of them grew up mostly, say grew up mostly because I don't remember exactly when Jack's dad passed away, but I think it was when he was a kid too. They both
Hmm.
grew up without fathers but had completely different circumstances. And that's where I think the stereotype of the gender roles really plays a huge part. And I
Hmm.
and it almost turns it on its head in a way. And to me, that combined with just the general acting prowess of the both of them, and the chemistry and the bluntness and pointedness of Jack's family, who it feels like he's actually related to, it was super fun to me to watch. Now obviously, like I said, the courtroom stuff, I'm gonna tell you, Christian, a little bit. It's almost like devil's advocate because I'm not really sure, but I do feel like at least in the 40s. Granted, this is in New York City. There's definitely a much larger precedent for these types of things to happen, and I'm not saying it
Showboatery.
was. Yes, and I'm not saying like obviously. I just think conflicts of interest are just a lot harder to pick up on. I mean, at this time compared to now, and I don't and obviously it's not a realistic scenario, but I do think I immediately accepted it by thinking, well, what's really stopping them from just kind of driving away? Like there's not really it wouldn't make any tonal sense if there was any
Hmm.
restriction on it. Maybe that's kind of a problem just with the premise in general, but that also kind of goes into the ending where I feel like the back and forth and the tension kind of comes to an all-time high between them. And I just think that it like it basically explodes in the middle of the courtroom. And I was like, okay, that's a little bit more of a justification to me to have that as a precedent. Is it worth accepting like just suspending disbelief for the whole film? Maybe not, but to me it was very easy.
I
So
didn't have a ton of trouble with the overall premise, um, in that at least Fred McMurray's character, he's initially trying to do these small steps just to be nice, and he kind of keeps getting pulled deeper and deeper and deeper without that being his intention.
right.
I think we could have seen at a certain point, though, we just reach a point where he's like, well, she's home with my family for the holidays. I guess this is just what it is. And he doesn't seem to feel any conflict at all. And then we see him conflicted about that later when they're at Niagara Falls. But I feel like there could have been we could have seen more conflict from him before that point, I think, to send home a little more this idea of like, I could be quite literally putting my career on the line here by trying to be a nice guy. And I feel like we don't really see that until he's like, well, God damn it, I'm in love with you. Um, there's a scene where he talks to his mom. Same actress who plays the mom in It's a Wonderful Life, actually. I neglected to look up her name. But there's a scene where he talks to his mom and he's like, well, mother, I think you should know she's a crook. But he doesn't seem to feel any conflict at all in that point. The conflict is like, well, I've got to tell my mom that I brought a filthy criminal into her house, not, oh, should I have done this in the first place?
I think that kind of works. It goes towards what I was saying earlier, where it doesn't feel like he's being a scumbag or leveraging his status as DA to like coerce her. It also gives I thought probably the funniest moment, which is in his family's house. I forget at what point this is, but Stanwyck approaches him and is like, "Oh, your mom seems to think that you're romantically interested in me," and he just like starts laughing, and she gets really pissed and like throws the popover at him. That was great. There's a lot of little interplay between them that's really fun and that I more or less enjoyed. This sounds like a contradiction of like everything I said before, but this exists in like a weird space between like having enjoyed most of the events in isolation, but basically not buying into the premise, and also thinking the whole "I'm in love with you, I want to marry you" thing probably happens too fast.
Which I think is typical of a lot of romances of this era.
Yeah.
I will say I kind of thought that I was thinking as if this were an earlier movie, and like a movie made earlier in the sound era. Because another thing that makes things feel very kind of awkward and bleak for a lot of it for me is that there's very little music, which by 1940 has got to be a deliberate choice, because studios figured out by about 31, 32, like, oh, we can put some music in this and it makes it a lot less awkward. I mean, you can see the transition from, say, James Whale's Frankenstein to Bride of Frankenstein, and those are only 3 or 4 years apart. Where studios realized, oh yeah, okay, score is a thing that we can actually use and audiences won't be confused and it'll communicate tone a lot better. And so many of the scenes in this that feel like they're meant to be comforting and warm and Christmassy, and that in any other film would have some kind of score to accent that under them, are just played in like complete silence other than the dialogue. Like the Christmas morning scene where they're all exchanging gifts, other than the dialogue and, you know, the sound of them passing things around, I don't think there's any music at all, which maybe that's there to make it feel more natural and more real to what a Christmas morning is actually like, at least in the 30s, when, you know, you unwrap Christmas gifts in your double-breasted suit. But to me, especially since there's some, you know, mention of like, oh, well, this is the same gift you got me last year, and it's so quiet. And I don't know, it just made it, there was this weird kind of note of like sad loneliness to it. And I don't know, that might just be me. Maybe it's just such contrast with like my feelings on what the holidays are like, because that's extremely individual from viewer to viewer and person to person. But it rubbed me a weird way throughout the whole runtime.
I think the way that I interpreted that, it goes back to what I don't want to make too many assumptions about stereotypes, but the era that this film was in definitely had very strict social norms, and there were reinforced stereotypes, especially in like the rural Midwest. Like that's like where that's like number one. And I think the generally the guiding force of a house, or the guiding, like, let's do this, let's get things done, let's open gifts, let's play music, let's really like lock in and like take control of the house, is generally done by the man of the house. And I'd almost say whether it's intentional or not, like the way I was interpreting it was the completely cold, like desolate nothingness that is present in Lee's house with the new guy and everything, and it just being like there's no Christmas here, there's no warmth,
Hmm.
there's no joy, versus Jack's house, which isn't holly jolly Christmas, Gloria. It's not amazing and beautiful, like we're playing all the normal tunes, and granted they do play some great tunes, but there's almost like an awkwardness because there is a man there, but it's
Hmm.
Willie the cousin who's really weird and obsessed with yodeling in the yodel hat, and you have his mom and his aunt, and they
Hmm.
have like this very distinct sister relationship where they pot shots at each other, and it's just like it's a very unusual, almost uncomfortable dynamic, I think, especially for the period. And I feel like not having the music in those spots kind of drives that home. At least
Hmm.
that's my interpretation of it.
Yeah. I mean, it could just be going
Yeah.
for a feeling, a sense of reality. Um, and maybe that's it. I mean, I did mention in my letterbox review that I feel like in reality, Christmas is sometimes a bit sad, even when it is mostly happy. Because I don't know, there's that sense of another year has gone by. People aren't here who were here last year. I think that's a fairly universal thing as well. Um, and there is even when he gets up to play the piano. I'm no pianist, but my sense when he's playing the piano in that scene is that he's like he only kind of remembers how to play and he only knows a few songs and he's a little slow at it, but it's like, it's a thing that's enjoyable to do because oh, get up and play the piano. You're so good at the piano. Which I think is also a very real thing that happens at family gatherings as well. Um, so yeah, and maybe it is just going for realness. And I don't want reality from my 40s holiday films. Possibly, I don't know. um, but yeah, I mean, I think I think of even like the 1951 version of Scrooge that we watched,
Mm-hmm.
however many years ago, like 4 years ago. There's
Wow.
scenes in that where they put
Oof.
like harpsichord, and that's set way before this, and those I think
Yeah.
still have a little more beat and pep to them. So I don't necessarily think it's like a period thing, like the setting is dragging it down or anything.
Hmm. If nothing else, the absence of a traditional score makes those sort of communal music moments more present or more special. It reminded me of the scenes in Meet Me in St. Louis, which we talked about a year or
Yeah,
two ago
yeah,
now, and those are kind of similar but more joyous and less strained than they are here. But I still enjoy that scene as sort of a relic of times past when it was normal for like every house to have a
yeah,
piano, and playing an instrument and singing was sort of a communal exercise instead of something to like practice in solitude and only do if you were like among the best at
yeah.
doing it. So I do think that old tradition sort of lends itself better to the holiday season than the way we treat amateur music now.
That scene did weirdly make me, and this is a reference that very few people in our audience are going to understand. It might just be a Christian and me thing, but it did weirdly make me think of Ringo Starr's very, very first solo album. Not the self-titled one, Sentimental Journey, which he released, I think, before the Beatles even broke up. And he described that as a collection of like when he was a kid, there's a piano in his like front room, or whenever his family had parties, everybody had their song that they sang once everybody had a bit to drink and was sitting in the front room just kind of lying around. Everybody got up and sang their song, and he said that album was a collection of those songs. And that scene does feel very much like that, where you've got the family together in the room, and even though there's only five of them, each of them seems to have their like, well, I can sing this one, I can play this one, and even though they aren't professional singers, they still get up and sing it because it's part of sort of the jollity of the season and the setting.
Mm-hmm. Zach, what did you make of the scene? Since we're talking about dark elements that may have disconcerted you, what did you make of Barbara Stanwyck's reunion with her mother?
I was surprised by that. Um, and that's another thing that I think makes this atypical for a holiday film of the period. I have yet to edit the trailer for the holiday specials. But to put that trailer together, I wanted to incorporate the trailers that were originally put out for these movies, and I'm intrigued to watch the trailer for this movie and see how much it emphasizes the holiday and the Christmas aspect of it. Because there are kind of, I think in a traditional holiday film of the 30s or the 40s, it would be pretty typical for them to come back to that mother character or that relationship and for there to be some kind of closure there. But we just see that mother character in this very bleak, dark house. She wants nothing to do with her daughter, and then we never come back. And again, that feels very real. I think especially, by your 30s, late 20s, 30s, there are young people who are now adults who do not have those good relationships with their parents or surviving parent. And so that's a real part of the holidays as well, is, reaching out, trying to say hello and getting really nothing in return, or even worse, an active, like, go away, I don't want to talk to you. So that was intriguing. And that certainly, I think, registered to me as a scene that was a deliberate stab of dour reality through the heart of kind of what could have been a screwball comedy leading up to that. I think the whole first half, I mean, I didn't look up a ton about what the director's intentions with this project were, but it's possible that this was intended to be almost like an anti-screwball comedy, because the entire first half, these comedic things are happening, and yet our characters are consistently met with hostility and anger, and not really in an especially like comedic or understanding way. There's a scene where they go on a detour, and it's a confusing detour. They crash through a fence, they sleep in a field, and wake up the next morning, and they're like, "Well, let's milk this cow that's here for breakfast." Which
That was
a
crazy.
scene that could be straight out of like It Happened One Night. But then the farmer comes along, and the farmer is very angry and will not see reason, and he
New
marches them into
Yorkers.
town at gunpoint, and they go to the Justice of the Peace's house, and he's sort of this doddery old fellow who lives with his wife. And I feel like you get this sense that maybe he'll be a little more understanding, but then he gets frustrated and angry with them. And they only leave when Barbara Stanwyck sets the waste paper basket on fire. And then we never go back to those characters. We never get any kind of resolution, any kind of like, oh, well, we understand. There's a half-hearted joke that they might have to go back to New York through Canada, and they actually do, because they would be fugitives from the law, presumably, if they were to drive back the way they came. And that feeling of hostility throughout the whole first half does put it on a different, maybe not more realistic foot, but more grounded foot, maybe, than something like It Happened One Night or Bringing Up Baby or something like that.
That's what makes it hot, Zach. You don't understand. You don't understand.
Milking a cow?
It's about these random occurrences and about being bad. Especially, he's willing to accept her at her worst to make her be the best, and he realizes he can't do that. So he has to accept her the way that she is. And his mom accepts the way she is and says that's no good. And she's like, I agree. But because their love for each other is so intense, they and it with that, plus them being in such denial and knowing that it's the wrong thing to do, she becomes the bigger person and he can't handle being the bigger person. And that just, like, that blew my mind. And to answer your question about the trailer, it's very confusing. I sped run the trailer.
Oh, okay. I do know it
really
starts with,
to it.
maybe they, I don't know. I've seen the very first slide of the trailer because I downloaded them last night to start editing this week. And I know the trailer starts with like a title card that says something like "The Secret Diary of a Bad Girl," which I think is a different vibe from what the movie does.
Confessions from the Diary of a Bad Girl.
Yeah.
And they like the last half of the trailer is basically just the end scene when they're going back and forth with the judge.
Oh. Yeah.
It's a little bit confusing. I mean, honestly, it's more intriguing because it 100% does not look like a holiday film at all.
Yeah.
And I think that lends to what you were saying. There's only one shot where there's any snow, and it's like it's weird that this is like the most Christmassy movie that we did, but it's not Christmassy really.
Also, I do have to wonder, which night are we meant to remember?
Maybe that's the irony. There's just quite a few. Actually, every night
Yeah.
has something crazy in it, probably.
Yeah. I would think it's either the first night at his family's house or the first night that they're together after she's let out on bail.
Is that
In the
Cowfield night?
Yeah.
Or does she spend the night at his
Yes. Does
apartment
that
and they leave the next day?
That goes back to what I was saying. I swear, there was no daytime. It's like the entire
Yeah.
film could have happened all in one night. They've done it all in one night. It
Yeah.
says in the letter, which I don't. This must be one of those things like a '40s film where they do the like whatever's in the trailer just didn't show up in the final cut or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I remember the night I met John, which I thought his name was Jack, but oh well. He's good looking, and after all, I'm only human. That is what I remember the night. John suggested that we ought to go on a little trip. I had visions of luxury and look at wait. What do you think I got? That's what it says. So
I think,
the answer
I think
is
they were
nobody
trying
knows.
to advertise this movie to be a lot steamier than it actually is.
Yes. Yeah, it does kind of appear that way.
I don't know. Maybe 1940 ladies were really after Fred McMurray, but I do agree that he at least kind of looks like a pile of mashed potatoes. I don't find him very good looking.
I think the fellows were probably after Barbara Stanwyck, to be fair. Mitchell, how did you find this, and what made you want to choose this?
I was scanning. I was using my Intel analyst brain. I was looking through all sorts of lists, and I forget which site it was. It was something that was not reputable whatsoever. That was listing off classic Christmas films that I had not heard of almost at all, and this was one of them. And I was like, this looks like something that I could watch, that I would like. So I chose it, and I saw the director's name. I was like, okay, I have to do it now. And yeah, that's how I chose it. And looking at the reviews, by the way, people are really into this. I was not into this as much as most of the Letterboxd reviews, but people were like, I really do think it's just like a happenstance. Like, we're in a weird fad right now where it's like okay to like broken women, and I think that's just what most people are hanging on to, and just like seeing this this is like we were saying, this is pretty atypical. This is pretty bad, and the guy is basically simping for her if you really think about it. Like he has this kind of facade where he's just but then he just full blown is like, we're getting married, and she's like, bro, we can't do that. Like I committed a crime and I have to go back.
So when do we feel the turning point is? Does it happen at the dance? Is there like a moment where, and maybe this is just because I don't really get anything from Fred McMurray. He's a stone you can't squeeze blood from in terms of acting. But do you feel that there's a moment where we see him make that decision of like, oh, I am actively in love with this woman, and maybe we can run away through Canada or something, which he does kind of suggest? Because I feel like they have a very nice time, and then they leave and they're at Niagara Falls, and then the aforementioned "God damn it, I love you" scene happens.
I guess you could chalk it up to the holiday spirit a little bit.
Blame it on the mistletoe.
Yeah, I do think there's something to that, just wanting something grand to happen in your life or in your relationships. I also don't think McMurray is probably gifted enough to show like a dynamic transformation over time. So I guess the most obvious point would be that kiss, and probably if not to look at how Sargent is acting, look at his mother taking her aside and being like, hey, my son worked really hard to get here. Maybe don't ruin his whole life. I think there's something to be said about our mothers knowing what's best for us and knowing what we're feeling more than we do at certain points.
Yeah, I feel like once he's there, McMurray is pretty good. Like, I believe that he's in love with this woman, especially in that scene in the cab where they drop her off at the courthouse and then he kind of circles the block again so they're not seen getting out of the same car. But I had the same issue with him in Double Indemnity, where in Double Indemnity it kind of feels like at some point a switch just flicks, and
Yeah.
now he's down. He's he's going to carry the plot through, and similarly here the switch flicks, and we don't. I feel like we don't. I said it earlier. We don't really see that struggle necessarily in the middle. We don't see the fulcrum on that seesaw.
Yeah, I don't know what y'all are smoking. I really liked McMurray's performance. I think he immediately came off as somebody that just locks in and is like, how can I make the most ridiculous quip right now and absolutely demolish everybody in the room with my charisma? And he basically is immediately like, I get, yeah, I don't want you to be here. Do you want to go out? Or something, and then he just takes her across the country to Indiana. You know what I mean? To her house, and he like just basically just met her, and knowing that she's messed up. This is a tale as old as time. There are people on Tinder and Bumble that are experiencing this right now. Okay, I cannot overstate that the relatability of this to many people. And I do think, to be fair, I understand where y'all are coming from. I understand that he's not performative or necessarily like, I think it's I think it's more about what he's not showing and more about what he's not exhibiting that is more intriguing to me. And I think the laugh that he gives is a protection mechanism, you know, when she's asking him, and it's like it keeps getting worse, like the denial keeps getting more intense, and then he turns that denial into completely letting his guard down in Niagara Falls, and that's the way that I looked at it. Similarly with her, I mean, clearly she has a lot of the tropes. She's kind of hanging along for the ride almost, but then when you actually get to her house and realize how she was raised, and you see how you know, his mom and his aunt immediately pick up on what kind of woman she really is, and that she really is like good at heart, and she just had a really terrible upbringing. I think first of all that his impression of that just locks it in. He's like, all right, I'm definitely right now. Like I can lock in and go for her now. But at the same time, you know, when you have your endorsement of your mom and your aunt, it's like, what are you supposed to do, right? but I just think I really enjoyed his performance, and especially the contrast, the dichotomy between how he was going in all cocky in the beginning, and then him being completely like head over heels with her, and her being a lot more reserved and less intrigued, is like a very, very interesting dynamic. I mean, I can't think of a lot of films at this period of time that would have really like leaned into that, because that's a really dangerous like precedent you're setting for young impressionable males in the audience. Like that's crazy.
Do we want to talk about the very ending? We've talked about this movie for about an hour at this point, but
Yeah.
I feel like the ending is worth discussing. How we don't really get a conclusion to the question of Barbara Stanwyck's case, which has been running throughout the entire movie. We don't even hear her sentence, and I think we're left with some doubt as to whether the jury will, sentence her especially harshly, because Fred McMurray does at least start his plan of like, well, I'm gonna kind of bear down on you in a way the jury isn't gonna like, so they'll be easier on you. But he doesn't get to go all the way through with it. What did you guys think of the ending? Because the ending, I think especially, is kind of a lot of movies from the 30s end very abruptly, and especially romances of the time did not necessarily have the expectation that I feel like a lot of audiences do now, that it has to end with a big romantic kiss while Counting Crows or something plays. But I think this especially makes kind of like a boldly downbeat choice in its ending.
Yeah, I guess. I think this is where the courtroom stuff does get pretty shambolic and ridiculous for me. When he and the defense attorney are talking over each other
Mhm.
at the judge and like jockeying. It's strange because really they both, at this point, McMurray's exposing the fact that he doesn't want her to be sentenced harshly, if at
Yeah.
all. So it's weird for that moment to be portrayed as like a shouting match between him and defense
Well, I think
counsel.
it's meant to be kind of like a duck season, rabbit season thing, where they kind of drop their facades and end up accidentally arguing the opposite thing. But Fred McMurray is like crying,
Mhm.
so it doesn't fully come across, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I more admire its attempts at realism, I guess, than I do criticize them. I think Mitchell just made a whole lot of great points about McMurray's performance and the development of the relationship, and I think this moment and the moment with Stanwyck's mother probably lend some level of believability to this, that we might not take this seriously at all if all of it was just I love you, let's get married, boom, go to City Hall, stamp, done, everything's happy and jolly.
It's almost like all of the scenes that would normally be like, well, he's like, well, don't you love me, and the girl would be like, oh yes, or like there's like some type of like dramatic flair, and there's like zero dramatic flair almost at all, and the amount of like, almost, I wouldn't say it's like I guess it is emasculating, like when he's in Niagara Falls, like basically crying and basically begging her
Mhm.
like not to accept her you know, her sentence, or you know, go through the whole thing and get prosecuted and everything. um I just think, yeah, I mean, like, to be fair to your point, Christian, this is when Christian compliments me and then I have to compliment him back to make it even. But I do like, out of anything, like that bothered me the most, like the back and forth, because it almost feels like a skit, or it's like getting into like skit, like the screwball comedy, almost like kind of what Zach was saying. Like it's like a, like it's kind of just a meme at this point, and the sense of realism is going out the window for the sake of, you know, the deeply affecting emotive moment. And at the same time, I think the film, it sets it up very well. I mean, I think it sets it up to the point where you couldn't expect anything else out of the courtroom proceeding. It was basically guaranteed he was going to fumble the bag on purpose with the courtroom, so he wouldn't fumble the bag with her.
Mhm.
And I think it really works. To be fair though, Zach, I do think it was a little bit abrupt. I mean, that title card was a little bit of a jump scare.
Yeah.
You know, they're like in that little area or whatever, and also it's in like the pitch dark again, which
Yeah.
is just weird.
With these ominous bars. Yeah.
Yeah, and that keeper lady, like, I don't, it was weird. Um but
Yeah.
but at the same time, I appreciate they didn't dwell on it too much. I mean, it really was just the emotive resolution. It definitely happened, and I think from that standpoint it made sense. But yeah, um
I think it also plays as a sort of nice moment of development for Barbara Stanwyck's character, in terms of like there's some reviewers that are kind of grumpy at the sort of maybe heavy-handed moral aspect of her being like, I gotta take this
Mhm.
sentence and blah blah blah, and I could see that too, but it definitely displays character development, even just from the scene when she's back home and her mother's saying, you stole from me, and she's like, I didn't steal, I borrowed, and I was gonna pay you back. And it's kind of like, maybe your mother's being a little harsh here, but it also doesn't totally feel like you're owning up to whatever
Mhm.
you did. And that's certainly not the case by the end
and
of the
I
movie.
think those dynamics that she shows really emphasizes how realistic her character actually is, because the way, like, that's emotional manipulation at its peak. It fully explains why in that very short scene, like why they have the relationship that they do, why her relationship is so poor with her mom. And I just think her she accepts the guilt and she feels guilty about it, but she doesn't turn it into a morally righteous thing where it's like I have to do this because it's the right thing to do or anything. Like they could have very easily carried that away. It's more just like she's just I did something really bad and I cannot control my own emotions. I cannot like deal with the fact that I have done this and I need to just accept the punishment. And I just think that's so it's so depressing. It goes back to what's I mean, it's like the most depressing outcome. Cause if she was more like, oh yeah, this is like the right thing to do, and he's like he reluctantly accepts it, or or they could just go full topsy turvy even and just be like she just accepts the sentence and he's just screwed and that's the end of it. But it's like this weird gray like he has to accept this and it's so depressing that he has to accept it, and for her it's so depressing that she has to accept it, and that's how it ends. And I just think amongst all of the love and everything that they feel for each other, it's a very weird, like very hot spicy ending. I think it's very hard to ingest.
I'm somewhat incredulous to hear, Christian, that the ending was when it really started to stretch your patient in terms of like courtroom procedure, because I thought for sure the opening of the opposing counsel essentially doing a one-man play as
Yeah, sure.
an I don't know if that was opening argument or what, but
that went on a little long.
Yeah, he was totally off his rocker, and they even whoever's like sitting next to McMurray is like, "Aren't you going to object?" And that would be, I mean, the judge could also
that's
pop
what
in
I
and
wondered.
be like, "Excuse me, sir, what the
I
heck are
thought
you doing?"
even
But
yeah.
I also
The opposing counsel doesn't necessarily
that a
have
judge
to
would
object, right? The judge can be like, "Can you get on with it?"
The judge can, but the judge doesn't
Mm.
have to, and there certainly are judges that won't. Even now, I feel like. So it made sense to me that even though that defense counsel sort of making a mockery of the courtroom, that McMurray's going to let it happen and he's just going to get his continuance and he's coasting. That made perfect
All
sense
right.
to me.
I had oh sorry, I had immediate flashbacks to the
no,
B movie.
you're good.
Through that whole thing because that was exactly how he acted. But
this is a bad fella.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even the scene when they're taken before the grumpy justice of the peace, that totally was believable to me as well. There are some really crotchety judges in in various municipalities that are going to give you a hard time no matter what. And I've seen that. Yeah.
Not gonna name names out here. May work in a law office one day. Must be impartial.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's all the thoughts I had. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Weekend review?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll jump right into it because I had rather a glum weekend. As anybody who knows me fairly closely will know, because I and this will also indicate to some people how long in advance we're recording these episodes. This past weekend was meant to be the second and final round of shooting for the Telltale Heart. I've been talking about it for a while, that I've been shooting that. I've been funding it. But we had some last minute issues and we had to cancel the weekend shoots.
No.
But I had paid for the location already. I couldn't cancel it or get a refund. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to spend the weekend on a bit of a sabbatical. I'm going to do some self-reflection. I'm going to internalize. I'm just going to sort of read and maybe do some writing. And I also thought, you know what? Okay, I'm going to try and stay away from screens. But in the evenings, maybe I'll watch some Terrence Malick. And so on Saturday, I watched Days of Heaven, which I'm again plumbing the wells of not a Christmas movie, but has some lovely winter shots, and is set in a setting that looks very nice in the snow in the couple of winter scenes that there are, as well as the fact that at least I know this is a flimsy connection, But for me, a lot of period pieces from sort of the Victorian era just kind of put me in a Christmassy mood, regardless of it whether they're set around the holidays or not. I think just because I love a Christmas Carol and like Dickensian Christmas so much, anything that kind of aligns with that sort of, has a holiday feel to me, or it feels appropriate around the holiday season. So there's lots of top hats and bowler hats in this movie, so it kind of checked some boxes. Um, it is an incredibly beautiful movie, and I really enjoyed it. This was the second Malick I watched after Thin Red Line, which I loved. Very different movie though, and Thin Red Line was made 20 years later, even though it was his third movie. And then the day after, I watched To the Wonder, which was not wondrous. Um, but Days of Heaven really kind of hit the sweet spot. Everybody talks about the cinematography, which is absolutely gorgeous. They shot a lot of it during golden hour, which meant that they could only film for like 20 minutes a day. And of course, the movie went incredibly over schedule and over budget. But I also I found it very kind of exciting and thrilling. I think when I was a bit younger, I probably would have found it boring, but I don't know. I guess there's some truth to the fact that as you get older, things that were boring when you were a kid do kind of start to appeal to you. I think all kids think that's kind of a lie. They think that their parents can't possibly enjoy John Adams. This was my perspective when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I probably, if I'd seen my dad watching Days of Heaven on television, I'd probably been like, can't I watch Ben 10? But, I do find something very thrilling to kind of the interplay of the sham marriage and Richard Gere sort of manipulating Brooke Adams and also Sam Shepard's character. And I know, Christian, in your review of the film, you said you found the characters very simple and difficult to relate to. I've got to put up some contrast. I think maybe I just was sort of lulled into the hypnotic setting, but I think even though we hear so little about these characters, so much of them is written in their behavior and just on their faces, and I think there's a lot to feel from them, despite there being pretty basic archetypes. And yeah, I was thrilled by it. I found it romantic, enjoyable, gorgeous to look at. I was watching it in a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, so that helped. And it's also pretty short. Terrence Malick has this reputation for making like multi-hour epics. He makes like one a decade, but a lot of his output is not really like that. I think The Thin Red Line is kind of what makes that impression, and The New World to some extent. But Days of Heaven is like 93 minutes. Badlands, I don't think, is much longer, if even that long. And the experimental trilogy are also all pretty short. They don't feel it. But yeah, I'd give a 4 out of 5 to Days of Heaven. I certainly recommend it. A lot of people would probably say it's more of a summer movie, but I would recommend checking it out. And it was the kind of entertainment I needed over my sort of dour sabbatical weekend.
I haven't seen anything especially Christmassy, but really everything I've seen lately is dour in one way or another. But I'll just lean into it and talk about Prince of Broadway, one of Sean Baker's early films. Who, if you know Sean Baker, you'll know him for directing Honora, recent Best Picture winner, or maybe The Florida Project. The Prince of Broadway is about a guy named Lucky who sells counterfeit merchandise in New York City, like counterfeit Gucci bags and Nike basketball sneakers and such. And one day, an ex-girlfriend shows up, tells him that he has a son, and this is his son, and she just like hoists the kid upon him and goes away and says she's leaving for 2 weeks and you have to take care of him. All of this completely out of nowhere. And what follows is a pretty stressful movie. It's definitely in the vein of even like Uncut Gems or something like that, where it's sort of very true to life and doesn't shy away from the stressful aspects of the character's life. But what's interesting about this is Sean Baker and his producers spent a long time researching this real world counterfeiting business in New York City, and they met the Prince Adu, the actor who plays Lucky, they met him during researching for locations and for casting, and he lived this life, and he was like, I can get you a cast and locations and all this if you make me the lead of your movie. Which is just crazy. I can't think of another movie that has this sort of production history. um, but it's not surprising at all, because it's so lively and genuine and realistic, that it's not surprising at all to hear that the cast are people that have lived and do live these lives. I gave it a 4, but it's definitely emotionally demanding. There's something to be said about how I feel like Baker, a lot of times when he's looking for these sort of unconventional slice of life movies, he's pushing for something visceral and different. But this eventually kind of takes the shape of like a father-son adventure in one way or another, which is a well-versed subgenre. We see it in everything from Lone Wolf and Cub to frickin' The Last of Us. And this is like a very strange, real world, stressful indie. But I can't believe that he made this on $50,000 budget, and just like researching for months and living in New York City for months and just like making this happen is such a feat of independent filmmaking. And the Criterion restoration is really good, and there's a neat introduction that Baker does where he talks about how they restored it and a little bit about how they made it. And it's very cool, very interesting, and I think in ways it's much more humane and thoughtful than what Baker does in Honora. But maybe that's a discussion for another day.
Well, I watched something a lot more fun.
Okay.
A lot more fun. Way more fun. I watched X-Men Days of Future Past, but we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about that. You already know what I'm going to talk about. You already know. So Oscar Isaac be damned. I did not watch X-Men Apocalypse. No. We're going to pretend. I was like, headcanon. I'm going full headcanon right now. I almost never do. But I'm just going to say, I'm just going to say that movie doesn't exist. So we're going to go right into Dark Phoenix, right? We're going to go right into Dark Phoenix directly.
Okay. Wow, this is a roller coaster.
Right after. I've only talked about 3 films, Zach.
No, but based on different tangents, I was like, maybe Del Toro Frankenstein. Maybe
I love subverting expectations, especially for Zach. He has no idea where anything is gonna go. But yes, Dark Phoenix. Okay, all right. It's Christian. I'm not gonna spoil it. I'll be very generic. I'll give more of my thought. He doesn't care. He's shaking his head.
I've read the comics, dude. It is what it is.
This film lost $133 million. Okay, it's one of the biggest box office bombs, and we have Deadpool and 2 and Deadpool Wolverine. That's what we have for X-Men now because of freaking Simon Kinberg, who wrote a lot of the X-Men films and Marvel and but is like not directed anything, and he directed this. And you know what? I'm gonna start off by saying Sophie Turner did her best. She had her moments. She did some great things. Okay. Jean Grey is a very sacred character. And in case anybody didn't know, I'm not as familiar with Jean Grey, but I understand that you can't mess her up because she's very emotionally complex and is kind of integral to the X-Men in a lot of ways. And this film basically it does that in a facade way. And what I mean by that is it tries to manipulate all of the characters that have been molded since First Class and just basically dunks on, like completely obliterates them for the sake of Sophie Turner, for her to have her best shot, basically. And is it as bad as Patrick Stewart getting murked by Scarlet Witch? It's not, honestly, it's not as bad as that, in my opinion. Like, that specific scene will always bother me. But in any other case, this is, I'm glad I waited to watch it because the expectations for the writing of these characters was so incredibly high. James McAvoy is a phenomenal actor. Everybody knows that. I'm now blanking on everybody else's names now. For
Fassbender,
yes,
Jennifer
yes,
Lawrence,
Michael Fassbender,
Basic White
Jennifer
Boy Ty
Lawrence.
Sheridan.
I was about
Yes.
to say Ty Burrell, but he's the dad from Modern Family.
These these actors are phenomenal, and they had garbage writing. This was horrible writing. This was like go fight them. Okay. Ah, they're on me. Oh no. That kind of writing. Okay. That's what this has devolved into Dark Phoenix. And there's quips, there's great things, but the level of like self-awareness and coordination and the duality of the older characters from the trilogy versus the new ones in Days of Future Past is like second to none. Like you cannot argue. Anybody that is coming into it and like has never seen superhero films cannot deny the level of complexity that these characters have compared to any other like superhero films. It's almost like unparalleled. And coming into Dark Phoenix, it's like, oh, it's a meme again. Everything has to be about Jean Grey. Go up into space and explain how she is the way that she is, without actually getting into her character. And that's what the film botches. Now, the action scene on the train, best scene ever. Great scene, filmed awesomely.
Yeah.
Finally, some good X-Men action and some use of powers. I'll say that. But everything else, it is like, I have to agree that Last Stand is a better telling of that story. To be honest with you, but I do have to give the film credit where credit's due. You still have the X-Men characters. You still have the precedent set. It doesn't completely ruin them beyond repair, but what it tries to do with the existing formula is way too much. It is just too much all at once, and it really, they botched the connective tissue that they could have had with this new timeline and the original trilogy characters. It just completely botches it. And I do have Nicholas Hoult too. This is his worst one. It's like not even close.
Oh, I
Just
forgot
the
he was
writing
in
is
that.
horrible.
Mm.
Jennifer Lawrence is totally devolved, and her character is completely diluted. It's crazy. I have to say this one line. I have to say it. I have to say it.
I
Okay.
know exactly what you're gonna
You
say.
already know what I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
Man, there's so many there's so many women saving men around here. It should be called ex-women. Okay? What? That was the most shoehorned line I've ever heard in my life. That was so out of left field. It made no sense.
I've heard she really hated the makeup process for Mystique.
Yes. Yeah.
And so she's in the films less and less, specifically in makeup in the films less and less, to the point that even in the trailers for Dark Phoenix, it was very apparent, like, oh, she wanted this stuff on and off quick because it does not look good. I worked at the movie theater when Dark Phoenix came out, so I kind of saw the movie, but like all in the wrong order while I was doing auditorium checks, and like some scenes I saw a lot and some scenes I only saw once. So I think I know what happened in it. Jessica Chastain was at a party and met an alien at some point. Whether it was at the beginning or the very end, I don't know.
Cannot confirm nor deny. I will say, I do have to say, for Charles Xavier, the him settling on having a positive relationship with the humans and being too comfortable in that was definitely a bold move. Whether or not it corresponds with his intellectual morality and like being very thoughtful about how he has a relationship with humanity is one thing, but I just think him being so, especially watching it after Days of Future Past, and you could say after Apocalypse too, it's like we really have to be like, hey, Mr. President, we're the go-to people now. We're big friends, going up to parties and stuff, and being comfortable with that. I just thought that was an interesting take, I think. But I don't know, guys.
Man, don't let me start talking about the comic, because I won't stop.
Oh, Dark Phoenix, the
But
comic.
I will say that like the most important thing to me about the comic story is this tension between Scott and Logan, because they're both like in love with Jean. So it's just so weird to me to try to tell the story without Wolverine.
That too.
But then obviously if you're doing it with this young X-Men there,
Mhm.
you can't really have Wolverine
Yep.
in there. But I don't know, man.
That's points that Last
it's-
Stand has on it then.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean the big like spoiler, the big like emotional climax of Last Stand is Wolverine being the one that has like the wherewithal to kill Jean when she has to be killed to save everyone else, basically. And there's a lot of drama that comes from Scott not being willing to accept that or do that, and Logan can.
Although Scott's not even like around for most of Last Stand, honestly. So I guess that
Yeah,
interplay
yeah,
doesn't
that's-
really
that's a
happen.
weakness of it.
He
He's
gets
around
like
a lot.
obliterated. Oh, he's in
Dark
Dark
Phoenix.
Phoenix a lot, yeah.
Yeah, but
Because
to
he's the
no
only one
avail.
there.
I can't remember a single line of dialogue he had at all.
Yeah, I am not a Ty Sheridan fan.
He was in The Tender Bar, the movie I talked about on Week in Review last episode.
And Ready Player One.
Yes. That's why
Which
I
still
remember
haven't
his
seen.
the lower part of his face. I remember very distinctly.
Yes. He's a big goggle actor.
Well,
Does Dazzler do music in this movie?
who is Dazzler?
Oh, I've heard that name though.
Who is that?
I just saw, I was scrolling the cast list and I saw, oh, they put Dazzler in the movie. Halston Stage, Allison Blair / Dazzler. In the comics, she's like a pop star and she has.
Oh,
like,
yes. Yes.
Oh, so
Yes.
she's not. Does she have basically the same powers as Jubilee?
I think so. Yeah.
But that scene that she's in, it devolves, and Nicholas Hoult and
Oh,
Jennifer
no.
Lawrence are like going back and
no.
forth. They're like, "You want to stay here? Yes. No. Yes.
Oh no.
Oh, I don't think
Oh,
I want to
no.
be here anymore." It's just like this dialogue
sounds
is written by
terrible.
a child, man. I don't know what to say. But anyway, we have gone up. It is Christmas time. It is
mistletoe
Hanukkah.
and
It is
wine.
Kwanzaa. It is the holiday cheer. I hope it's snowing. I hope you're not in school.
Yeah, I guess these specials didn't turn out to be the most Christmassy Christmas specials we've done. But, you know, we hope you and yours have had a good holiday season. This episode will probably go out on Christmas Eve or
Wow.
thereabouts. So enjoy Christmas Day, enjoy New Year's. I don't think we have anything to preview because we will be returning to our regularly scheduled Game of the Game prompt polls after the new year. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning into the show for 6 years at this point. This is the 6th annual Cookie Pocket Holiday Specials.
Wow.
Ancient.
And we've come a long way.
Yeah.
We've discussed an awful lot of things, some many times, some only once. I'm running out of things to say. So happy
Hold on to your
holidays.
mulligans.
War is over if you want it. And here at Cookie Pocket, we're simply having a wonderful Christmas time. Goodbye.
Have a beautiful Yuletide.